The story of Joseph, from pit to palace. Forgiveness, destiny, and God's plan. In the land of Canaan, under the open sky of the ancient Near East, there lived a man named Jacob, also called Israel. His household was large, filled with 12 sons, but among them one was unlike the others. His name was Joseph. Joseph was young, only 17, full of life, full of dreams. He was the son of Jacob's old age, and the firstborn of Rachel, the woman Jacob had loved with all his heart. To Jacob, Joseph wasn't just another child, he was the living reminder of his deepest love. And so, Jacob did something that would set Joseph apart forever. He gave him a gift, a robe of many colors. It wasn't just a piece of clothing, no, this robe was a statement. It spoke loudly of Jacob's favor, of Joseph's special place in his father's heart. Every bright thread told the other brothers, "This is the chosen one. This is the son I treasure most." And that robe, so beautiful on Joseph's shoulders, burned like fire in the eyes of his brothers. You see, jealousy is a dangerous seed. It begins small, but when watered with comparison, it grows into hatred. And Joseph's brothers, they could not bear him. Their resentment deepened when Joseph began to dream. One night Joseph came to them, his eyes wide with excitement. Listen to this dream I had." The brothers stopped their work and frowned. Joseph continued, "We were binding sheaves of grain in the field, when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine, and bowed down to it." The brothers clenched their jaws. Bowed down to him. Another night Joseph dreamed again. "This time," he said, "the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowed down to me." Now it was too much. His brothers shouted, "Do you really think you will reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" Even Jacob, though he loved Joseph, scolded him. "Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow to the ground before you?" Yet Jacob stored these words in his heart. He wondered if God's hand was upon his son in ways no one could yet understand. The brothers' hatred grew. Every time Joseph walked by in that colorful robe, they saw not a brother, but a rival. Every dream he spoke felt like an insult to their place in the family. Jealousy was now full-grown, and soon it would demand blood. Pause for reflection, narrator's soft voice. Think about this for a moment. Favor can attract jealousy. Blessing can provoke hatred. When God sets you apart, not everyone will celebrate you. Sometimes the very people closest to you will misunderstand or oppose the destiny that rests on your life. Joseph had no idea that his dreams were stirring up a storm that would soon sweep him into the darkest valleys of his life. One day, Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers, who were pasturing the flocks near Shechem. Obediently, Joseph set out across the fields, his robe gleaming in the sunlight. Far off, the brothers saw him coming, and at once their hearts turned cold. "Look!" one of them hissed. "Here comes the dreamer!" Their eyes narrowed. Their hatred, long hidden, now rose to the surface. "Come now," they whispered among themselves. "Let us kill him. Let's throw his body into a pit and say a wild beast devoured him. Then we will see what becomes of his dreams." The seed of jealousy had blossomed into a murderous plan, but among them was Reuben, the eldest. Something in his conscience stirred. "No," he said, "do not shed blood. Throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him." Reuben secretly hoped to rescue Joseph later and return him to his father. And so, when Joseph arrived, smiling, unaware of the danger, his brothers pounced. They tore off his colorful robe, the symbol of his father's love, and dragged him toward the cistern. Joseph cried out, confused, pleading, "What are you doing, brothers? Why?" But no mercy came. They hurled him into the dark pit. The boy who dreamed of stars was now trapped in a hole in the ground, his voice echoing against empty stone walls. Above, his brothers sat down to eat their meal, ignoring his cries. But fate was not finished with Joseph. For on that very road a caravan of Ishmaelite traders was passing by, their camels loaded with spices and goods, heading down to Egypt. And in that moment, Judah spoke words that would change the course of history. "What profit is it if we kill our brother? Come, let's sell him to these Ishmaelites. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." The others agreed, and so for 20 pieces of silver Joseph was sold, a beloved son, now a slave, a dreamer, now in chains. The boy who had once worn a robe of colors was dragged away toward Egypt, disappearing into the horizon. The brothers dipped his robe in goat's blood and brought it to Jacob. "We found this," they said. "Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe." Jacob tore his clothes in grief. He fell to the ground, weeping bitterly. My son Joseph has been torn by wild beasts. Surely he is dead." And for many days he mourned, inconsolable. But Joseph was not dead. He was alive, and though betrayed, abandoned, and sold, the hand of God was still upon him. This is how Joseph's journey began, not with a throne, but with betrayal, not with honor, but with humiliation. Yet even in the pit, even in the chains, destiny was at work. Because sometimes God allows us to be broken so that his greater plan can be revealed. And Joseph's story had only just begun. What Joseph could not see in that pit, God already saw from heaven. The pit was not his end. It was the first step on the road to the palace. The morning sun rose over the hills of Hebron, warm and golden. Yet for Joseph's brothers it carried no joy. Their hearts were heavy with jealousy, twisted with bitterness, and their thoughts darkened by envy. Joseph, meanwhile, unaware of their brewing hatred, made his way toward them. His father had sent him with food and news, as any younger brother would. His colorful robe, the coat of many colors that Jacob had given him, shimmered in the sunlight, each stitch reminding his brothers of their father's love and favoritism. From a distance, they saw him coming. The sight of that robe ignited the fire of envy. One brother hissed, "Here comes the dreamer." Another sneered, "Always with his visions of ruling over us." A third spat on the ground, "Let's put an end to his dreams once and for all." And then, in a chilling whisper, someone said, "Let's kill him." The words hung in the air. Their hearts raced. Murder was not far from their minds. The wilderness around them was silent, almost as if creation itself was holding its breath. But Reuben, the eldest, stepped forward. His conscience, though clouded, was not completely silenced. "No, we must not shed his blood. Throw him into that pit instead. Leave him there. That way we won't be guilty of killing him." The brothers, after a tense pause, agreed. Joseph arrived, smiling innocently, carrying bread and water. He greeted them warmly, never imagining that his own flesh and blood plotted against him. But the moment he drew close, their hands grabbed him. Rough fingers tore at his robe, pulling away the coat of many colors that symbolized his father's love. Joseph struggled, pleading, his voice cracking with fear. "Brothers, what are you doing? Please, why are you treating me like this?" But his cries fell on deaf ears. Hatred had hardened their hearts. They dragged him to the edge of a dry, empty pit. The earth was hot, the stones jagged, the shadows deep. Without mercy, they shoved him in. He tumbled down, scraping against the walls, landing with a thud at the bottom. Dust rose around him, filling his lungs. He looked up, his eyes wide with disbelief. The brothers he loved, the brothers he trusted, were looking down at him with cold, hard stares. Then they turned away. While Joseph wept in the pit, begging for mercy, his brothers sat down nearby and ate their meal. Their laughter, their chewing, their careless chatter echoed in the air, a cruel contrast to his cries from below. But God was watching. Heaven was not blind. The pit was not Joseph's end. It was the beginning of a destiny beyond imagination. As the brothers debated what to do next, a caravan appeared on the horizon, Ishmaelite traders traveling toward Egypt. Their camels carried spices, balm, and myrrh. The jingling of bells and the crunch of camel feet stirred an idea in Judah's mind. What profit is there if we kill our brother? Let's sell him instead. That way his blood won't be on our hands, and we'll be rid of him forever. The others nodded. The deal was struck. Rope was lowered into the pit. Joseph's heart lifted. Perhaps his brothers had changed their minds. Perhaps they would forgive him. But as his hands grasped the rope and he climbed up, relief turned to terror. Instead of being welcomed, he was bound tightly. His wrists were tied, his fate sealed. He cried out, "Please don't do this. I am your brother. I am your own flesh and blood." But his words were swallowed by greed and envy. The Ishmaelites counted the silver coins. The brothers watched coldly as Joseph was led away, his feet stumbling in the dust, his eyes brimming with tears. The colorful robe, now stained with dirt and later smeared with goat's blood, would become the cruel evidence they presented to their father, Jacob. Back in the pit, silence reigned. The boy who once dreamed of ruling was now a slave on his way to a foreign land. Yet even in chains, Joseph's story was not over. His brothers thought they had silenced his dreams, but they had only set in motion the plan of God, a plan that would one day turn a slave into a ruler, a victim into a savior. Because when man plots evil, God can turn it into good. The desert winds carried Joseph into Egypt. The young man who once wore the robe of many colors now walked in chains, his wrists bound, his dignity stripped. The caravan snaked its way along the Nile, and the towering monuments of Egypt loomed in the distance. To Joseph, this was a foreign world, strange gods carved in stone, people speaking a tongue he barely understood, the smell of incense and spices mingling with the dust. Everything was unfamiliar. Everything reminded him that he was not free. And yet, even in this strange land, Joseph carried something with him: his faith. The God of his fathers had not abandoned him. The pit had not destroyed him. He whispered silent prayers as the sun beat down on his back. "Lord, I don't understand why this is happening, but I trust you. Be with me." The traders sold Joseph to Potiphar, the captain of Pharaoh's guard, a man of power and authority. To any other slave, this might have been the end of hope. But Joseph was different. In Potiphar's house, Joseph worked with diligence. Every task, no matter how small, he did with excellence. He swept floors as though he were caring for a palace. He managed the fields as though they were his own inheritance. And soon, everyone noticed. Potiphar watched this Hebrew slave and saw something remarkable. Everything Joseph touched prospered. His hands brought order to chaos. His leadership multiplied resources. His presence carried a strange blessing. It wasn't Joseph's skill alone. It was the favor of God resting on him. So Potiphar promoted Joseph. From a lowly servant, he became the overseer of the entire household. Every decision, every account, every responsibility, all placed in Joseph's care. For a moment, it seemed as if Joseph's life had turned a corner. The boy who had been betrayed was now trusted. The slave was now a steward. But trials were not over. In the shadows of the house, another storm brewed. Potiphar's wife, intrigued by Joseph's appearance, began to notice him. Scripture says Joseph was handsome and well-built, and her eyes lingered far too long. "Day after day," she whispered, her voice laced with temptation, "Come, lie with me." Joseph's heart pounded, but his answer never wavered. "No, my master has trusted me with everything in this house. How could I betray him? More than that, how could I sin against God?" But temptation doesn't give up easily. She pressed him, again and again. Then came the day when the house was quiet, servants gone, halls empty. Potiphar's wife cornered Joseph, her hands clutching his robe. This was the moment of decision. Joseph didn't argue. He didn't negotiate. He fled. He tore himself away, leaving his garment in her hands as he ran outside. But rejection turned to fury. Humiliation burned in her heart. Clutching his robe, she screamed, twisting the story into a lie. "Look, this Hebrew slave tried to violate me." Her words cut deeper than any knife. Her accusation spread through the household like wildfire. When Potiphar returned, rage clouded his eyes. Without trial, without hearing Joseph's side, he ordered his imprisonment. The prison doors clanged shut. Darkness swallowed Joseph once again. The pit of betrayal had led him here. The chains of slavery had turned into the chains of injustice. Joseph sat on the cold stone floor, his heart heavy. He had done everything right. He had resisted temptation. He had honored God. And yet here he was, abandoned, falsely accused, forgotten by man, but not forgotten by God. Even in prison, God's presence did not leave him. The keeper of the prison soon noticed the same thing Potiphar had seen. Joseph carried wisdom, integrity, and a mysterious blessing. So Joseph found favor again. He was placed in charge of the other prisoners. What was meant to break him only built him stronger. Every trial was shaping him. Every injustice was preparing him. Every loss was guiding him toward the destiny God had planned. What Joseph could not see was that these walls, these bars, this suffering were leading him one step closer to Pharaoh's palace. Because sometimes the road to glory runs through the darkest prison. The prison was cold, its walls stained with despair, its corridors echoing with the groans of men who had been forgotten. Yet even in that place, Joseph stood out. He did not let bitterness consume him. He worked diligently, served faithfully, and most of all, he prayed. The warden noticed. Soon Joseph was entrusted with managing the prison itself. Even in chains, he carried the dignity of a leader. Even behind bars, he walked like a free man, because true freedom is not of the body but of the soul. One night, 2 new prisoners arrived, Pharaoh's cupbearer and Pharaoh's baker. Both had offended the king and were thrown into custody. Days passed, and one morning Joseph noticed their troubled faces. "Why do you look so sad today?" he asked gently. They exchanged glances. Then the cupbearer spoke. "We both had dreams last night, but there is no one here to interpret them." Joseph's answer was simple, yet profound. "Interpretations belong to God. Tell me your dreams." The cupbearer described his vision, a vine with 3 branches blossoming and producing grapes, which he squeezed into Pharaoh's cup. Joseph listened carefully, then declared, "The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will restore you to your position." Hope sparked in the man's eyes. Then the baker told his dream, 3 baskets of bread on his head and birds eating from them. Joseph's voice grew heavy. "The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and the birds will eat your flesh." The silence was thick. The dreams were clear, yet the truth was not easy to bear. 3 days later, Pharaoh's birthday came. Just as Joseph said, the cupbearer was restored and the baker was executed. Joseph turned to the cupbearer before he left and pleaded, "Remember me when you are free. Mention me to Pharaoh. Help me get out of this prison." But when freedom came, the cupbearer forgot. Joseph remained in prison for 2 long years, 2 years of waiting, 2 years of questions, 2 years of silence from the man he had helped. Yet Joseph held on. Faith whispered what circumstances could not. God is not finished with you. Then one night, Pharaoh himself was shaken. He dreamed 2 strange dreams. In one, 7 healthy cows were devoured by 7 gaunt cows. In the other, 7 good ears of grain were swallowed by 7 thin ears. Pharaoh awoke troubled. He called for magicians, wise men, priests, but no one could explain the dreams. It was then, at last, that the cupbearer remembered. "Today I am reminded of my shortcomings," he told Pharaoh. When I was in prison, there was a young Hebrew who interpreted my dream, and it happened just as he said. Pharaoh commanded, 'Bring him to me.' Joseph was hurriedly taken from the dungeon. He bathed, shaved, and changed his clothes. A prisoner's rags were replaced with fresh garments, but his spirit, strong, humble, and faithful, was the same. He stood before the most powerful man on earth, Pharaoh of Egypt. Pharaoh spoke, 'I have had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I hear it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can explain it.' Joseph's reply was not prideful. It was honest, humble, and full of faith. 'I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires.' Pharaoh told his dreams. Joseph listened, then his voice rang with clarity. Both dreams mean the same thing. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of abundance are coming, followed by 7 years of severe famine. The famine will be so great that the years of plenty will be forgotten." Pharaoh leaned forward, his eyes wide. Joseph continued, "Now let Pharaoh appoint a wise man to oversee the land. Let him collect 1/5 of the harvest during the 7 good years and store it, so that Egypt may survive the famine." The court fell silent. Pharaoh turned to his officials and asked, "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" Then, in a moment that changed history, Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. Today I set you over all the land of Egypt." Joseph's heart raced. From prisoner to governor, from forgotten Hebrew slave to ruler of the world's greatest empire. Pharaoh gave him his signet ring, fine robes, and a gold chain. Joseph was dressed like royalty. He was paraded through the streets of Egypt in a chariot, and people bowed before him. What his brothers thought was his end had become his beginning. The pit, the betrayal, the prison, all of it was preparation for this moment. God's unseen plan was unfolding, and Joseph was now standing at the threshold of his destiny. The years of abundance came, just as Joseph had said. For 7 years the fields of Egypt overflowed with grain. Barns and storehouses were filled to the brim. Joseph oversaw it all, his wisdom guiding a nation's survival. Then the famine struck. The land grew dry, the rivers shrank, crops withered in the sun. In Egypt the people cried out to Pharaoh for food, and Pharaoh told them, "Go to Joseph, do whatever he tells you." Joseph opened the storehouses, and grain flowed out to feed the people. But the famine stretched beyond Egypt, into Canaan, where Joseph's family lived. Jacob, his father, heard that grain was in Egypt. He looked at his sons and said, "Why do you just keep looking at each other? Go down there, buy food for us so that we may live and not die." So 10 of Joseph's brothers traveled to Egypt. The youngest, Benjamin, stayed behind with Jacob. They arrived, weary from travel, desperate for grain. They bowed low before Egypt's governor, not knowing that the powerful man before them was their own brother. Joseph looked at them. His heart pounded. Memories of the pit, the betrayal, the tears all came rushing back. These were the very men who had sold him into slavery. Yet here they were, bowing before him, just as his dreams had foretold. He recognized them instantly, but they did not recognize him. Years had changed him. Egyptian garments clothed him. Authority surrounded him. His voice carried command. Joseph restrained himself. He tested them, spoke harshly, accused them of being spies. He demanded they bring Benjamin to prove their honesty. His brothers trembled. They remembered their past sins. They whispered among themselves, not knowing Joseph understood their language. "This is happening because of what we did to Joseph," they said. "We saw his anguish when he begged for mercy, but we did not listen." Hearing this, Joseph turned away and wept. His heart broke, yet he kept his identity hidden. Days passed. The brothers returned with Benjamin. When Joseph saw his younger brother, the boy who had not betrayed him, the one most beloved by their father, his heart swelled. He prepared a feast for them, yet still he tested them, placing his silver cup in Benjamin's sack to see how his brothers would respond. When the cup was discovered, the brothers tore their clothes in grief. Judah stepped forward and begged, "Take me instead. Let Benjamin go free. Our father's heart would break if he loses him." At last, Joseph could bear it no longer. His voice cracked. His tears flowed freely. He ordered the room cleared of all Egyptians. And then, with trembling lips, he revealed the truth. "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt." Shock froze them. Fear gripped their hearts. The past they had buried came crashing down. But Joseph's next words were not words of revenge. They were words of grace. "Do not be distressed. Do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. You meant evil against me, but God turned it into good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." He embraced Benjamin, and both wept. Then he kissed each brother, and tears washed away years of pain. The news reached Pharaoh, who welcomed Joseph's family with honor. Jacob himself came to Egypt, and father and son embraced after decades apart. The boy who was thrown into a pit was now seated in a palace. The slave was now a savior, and through it all, Joseph's life echoed one eternal truth. God's plan may be hidden, but it is never absent. His timing is perfect. His purpose is unstoppable.